Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. Really pretty big week for markets last week in the US. You saw the Federal Reserve increase interest rates by another quarter point, taking the target rate now to 5 to 5.25. Now the Fed rate hike, that was the 10th hike in the last 10 meetings. And now sort of debate continues as to see whether we will see any further hikes. I'm waiting to see how those rate hikes really impact the economy. Because certainly there's growing sort of debate now about potentially Fed having to cut rates by the end of the year, and certainly in 2024 looking for some pretty major interest rate cuts. Also as well on the earnings side, Apple came out with another pretty amazing beat. And really so far earnings have been pretty good. About 90% of the companies have reported, and around 80 to 85% have actually beaten estimates. But now the market awaits another big test with the inflation data coming out later this week. You've got CPI and then PPI. Now, certainly in the US, inflation is falling, but it's just a question of the pace of that fall. And then, really on the back of some pretty strong jobs data, which came in at 253,000 versus expected around 190. But also as well, what was maybe a little bit concerning was some downward revisions to previous months by around 70,000 for March and February. So you put that all into the mix, and you've got a reasonably robust economy. You've still got a few little concerns over the sort of smaller regional banks, although they did have a pretty good day last Friday. But some of these shares are sort of down, 20, 30% one day, up 40% the next, down 10%, 15% the following day, and then back up 80% the following day. So still quite a bit of nervousness out there in those smaller regional banks, which obviously isn't helping sentiment. Also, as well, at the weekend, we did have the much anticipated sort of annual meeting of Berkshire Hathaway, and really very interesting to see what Warren Buffett has to say. Now, on the back of the strong jobs data, you've got 10-year currently trading around 352, and the 2-year just above 4%, 401. But certainly on the 2-year in particular, that's way off its highs, which was over 5% sort of 4 to 5 weeks ago. Also as well, obviously the other big concern in the US is the debt ceiling. That really does need to get sorted. It's quite interesting. You've got a lot of new Republicans in there playing a little bit of hardball. But again, the sort of, impact of the US being unable to pay its debts would really be catastrophic, not just for the US, but for the global economy. Interesting note on the Japanese services sector, their sort of PMIs, that was up for the 5th month running. Now, obviously, the Japanese economy has been pretty much malaise for the last sort of, 3 decades. So it'll just be interesting to see if it can get any sort of real momentum going forward. Oil sort of recovered a little bit of lost ground, currently around sort of $73 and change, but again, sort of well off the sort of $80 it was trading about a week ago. And the UK, obviously quite interesting after the coronation of the weekend. Certainly there was a lot of tourists in sort of London and the UK for that event, and it'll just be very interesting to see what a boost that gave to the economy. Also as well, for the first time since 2008, the UK banks are now giving 100% mortgages with no deposit. So on the back of that, you would expect that to give a little bit of a boost to the housing market. ECB, as expected, increased interest rates by 25 basis points, taking their sort of target rate now to 3.25. And again, as we head into those summer months now, many of these European countries will be looking for a major boost from the sort of tourist dollars and sort of euros to be spent to sort of boost their economies. Because again, overall, the European economy is not in too bad a shape. Many people were predicting a pretty harsh recession out there. The same with the UK, and it really hasn't materialised. Yeah, it's going to be interesting in Australia because certainly the Reserve Bank there has taken a much more sort of conservative sort of path in terms of interest rate hikes. Currently around 3.85 on the cash rate. And potentially, is that it now in Australia? Many people are now predicting that they will be on pause for the next meeting. And, then as times get a little bit tougher out there, the Reserve Bank may well be done. Because again, the Australian economy does seem to be in reasonable shape. And interestingly, the housing market there does seem to have bottomed out now. And indeed, in some areas, actually showing some small gains. Now, that's certainly not the case in New Zealand. The housing market is still falling, really on the back of those interest rate hikes, and potentially the Reserve Bank has got a further rate hike coming in May. Now, if that is the case, that then takes the OCR to 5.5%. And would have seen a rate hike at every meeting since September 2021. Now, the latest inflation data on food is really still pretty concerning. That's still pretty high out there. But again, it's really been hit by sort of supply and demand. Certainly on the supply side in terms of the sort of weather disruption and everything, that's really having a major impact on prices. And obviously with the North Island just being hit by another major sort of weather bomb, it's just going to be interesting to see what impact that has on the food prices. Now, certainly I think it's fair to say that the honeymoon period for Chris Hipkins is well and truly over. Just coming back from the UK, sort of, lauding the fact of a free trade agreement with the UK. But again, it's going to take time for those to be implemented, and really you're not going to see any immediate impact. And in the background, obviously, you've still got all the political mayhem with, politicians sort of jumping party, etc. And, just going to be interesting to see how that plays through in the next sort of opinion poll. With the budget coming up as well, it's, very hard to see how there's going to be much given away in the budget. Now again, a good time to check those KiwiSaver balances just to make sure you've made enough contributions to get that government contribution by the end of June. Now if you're looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles. I look forward to speaking to you soon.